Hello, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America, featuring today's top directors sharing behind-the-scenes stories of their latest films and insights into the craft of directing. Please take a second to subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. This episode takes us behind the scenes of director Edward Zwick's new biographical drama, Trial by Fire. The film tells the tragic and true story of Cameron Todd Willingham, who was convicted of an arson-related triple homicide in 1992. During his 12 years on death row, he forms an unlikely bond with Elizabeth Gilbert, a Houston playwright who battles with the state to expose suppressed evidence that could save him. In addition to Trial by Fire, Mr. Zwick's directorial credits include the feature films Jack Reacher, Never Go Back, Love and Other Drugs, Blood Diamond, The Last Samurai, Courage Under Fire, Legends of the Fall, Glory, and About Last Night, the movies for television Having It All and Paper Dolls, and episodes of the series Once and Again and Family. He earned a DGA Award nomination for his 30-something episode Accounts Receivable, Michael's Brother, and won the DGA Award for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Dramatic Specials for his 1983 movie for television, Special Bulletin. Following a recent screening of the film at the Harmony Gold Theater in Los Angeles, Mr. Zwick spoke with director Max Winkler about filming Trial by Fire. During their conversation, Mr. Zwick discusses how he came to direct the film, his special connection with editor Steven Rosenblum, and how shooting digitally allowed him to suitably capture Willingham's time in solitary confinement.
Hey guys. Hey Ed.
Hey Max.
Happy to be here with you.
Yeah.
It's ironic because I probably wouldn't be in the DGA if it wasn't for your movies. I started watching your movies at a very young age, and I remember...
Is this intended to make me feel good or bad? I'm just
amazing, because you're still making great movies. What are the odds? And I'm honored to be here.
Thank you.
I'm honored to talk about this movie and to be here with you guys. And I have some questions.
Please.
I want to start with the ending, because it's, I'm sure, fresh in everyone's mind, and it's still fresh in mine. You made a very specific choice, which to me feels like the only choice, which was to show the entire nuts and bolts process of what it means to put somebody down.
Yep.
And I want to talk about, was that always in the script? Was that one of the first things you thought about when it came to it, et cetera?
Well, I mean, it was our intention once we decided what the shape of the movie would be. The idea being that the audience might feel might condemn Todd Willingham, as did the people of Corsicana, so that having done that, having taken that position, they then become complicit in what happens, because it was a rush to judgment, and they sort of just, identified him as the other, and the absence of a real trial or due process has a consequence. And I think too often we have a very casual attitude about what the death penalty is. And I think so as to be forced to have a more realistic one, I felt obliged to show all of it.
It's amazing what you're saying about the judgment, because we have a guy here who does a lot of things that are condemnable to some degree. Mm-hmm. He's obviously in some form verbally and potentially physically abusive to his wife, questionable father, questionable spotty history, and yet those are the things that are putting him on trial with lack of any real evidence to be put to death. And I was so satisfied by the portrayal you did of Willingham, because there was no gloss to it whatsoever, and yet you can still be a person who can go through a change, which is why the movie works, because you see him change subtly, even though he has that sort of little flare at the end when he's looking at the glass and he sees Stacy. But you can be all those things, and yet that still doesn't mean that you need to be put to death.
Yeah, I mean, had it been otherwise, I think there would have been the real possibility of it seeming sentimental. I think one of the things that drew me to the story was the thing that you're articulating, is that, despite all of those things, it made even a better case, I think, for what the movie aspired to talk about.
Yeah, it doesn't. To me, the movie works so successfully because of that. Because you are wrestling with these questions about morality and what do people deserve, and you see, and I know the way that these prisoners are treated, and how hard you have to work to scrape with your fingernails for any sense of humanity, whether it's through the drawing and then, thank God, through Laura's character.
Well, I mean, I think something I thought about a lot when I first started working on the script with Jeffrey was the notion of fairness, because fairness is a metaphor for all of us, because we all deal with unfairness of a certain kind, and that could be disease, it could be a car accident, it could be anything. But I also felt particularly drawn to this notion of injustice, that this is a time, at least for me, I think for a lot of us, that we are particularly sensitive to that as an issue. I mean, we have an unindicted, conspirator, a predator on top of the chain at this moment. I think we are aware of the disproportionate spread of income in the country. There's any number of things that make us suddenly and increasingly aware of injustice. And I felt that this was the perfect opportunity to talk about it in microcosm.
After watching the way you shoot the final scene and knowing that there was no real evidence whatsoever to put this complicated yet innocent of the arson and murder of his 3 children's, after they put Willingham down, and then you show the Rick Perry section at the end credits, and then the applause that I don't think Brian Williams thinks that that's what the response is going to be, and the raucous applause he gets, and then you cut out the image of Rick Perry, and it's just the applause over the end credits, and the hair on the back of my neck stands up over that, because that's a huge population of America that are celebrating that.
Yeah, I mean, I felt it was important to contextualize the story. We had put it just in this little, small bubble, but in fact, it feels to me indicative of something much larger. Mm. And when I look at those guys there, and there's a shot, because it's video, and it's a little vague at a certain point as to, is that, I know I see that's him, but who's that, Carly Fiorino or Meg Whitman, and who is that? Is that, and I see Mitch McConnell, and I see, so many other people in my mind who are there, and I felt it was important to somehow place this issue, which has become a political football. We have a president who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times to put the Central Park 5 to death before they were even tried, and in fact exonerated. He's talking about death to drug dealers and treason and death. I mean, that this is a legitimate, and I'm hoping an increasingly important issue, because ever since Gavin Newsom has done what he's done with the moratorium, all of the current presidential candidates have signed on to suggest that they might too. So could that possibly bubble up as a real issue in the election year?
I think the performances in this movie across the board, and we'll get into the specifics of casting, are astonishing, from the one-line players to the favors. Yeah, we should applaud that, because they're stunning.
Yeah, the act. Listen, that's the best part, and Blake Lewis, who plays the snitch, I think it was his first movie, and McKinley Belcher, who plays Ponche, he had done one small thing before. He's done something now bigger. I think that Chris Coy playing the guard.
I loved his change at the end.
Just fantastic. He's on the Deuce right now, but unrecognizable, I suspect, to those who might know his work. And Emily Mead playing Stacy.
Always good. One of our most underrated actresses.
Yeah,
I think. Also on the Deuce.
And that part could have easily become so sort of two-dimensional. Mm. But yeah, that's one of the great joys of this kind of movie.
But also a through line through your catalog of work as a writer, director, producer in television and movies has always been the performances, breaking gigantic stars from Brad Pitt to Denzel to Matt Damon and Courage Under Fire and Jack O'Connell gives a really brave, beautiful performance in this. And
Yeah.
And I want to speak about how when you're filming that final scene, how many takes are you doing? How much is storyboarded? What do you know you're going to need to do? And how do you keep him in that mind state?
It's funny because I do a lot of preparation before a scene, not necessarily storyboarding, but in notes and in shot ideas. And as we got closer and closer to this scene, I found myself resisting it.
Was it scheduled for the end of the movie?
Very close to it. And none of us wanted to go there, wanted to do it. We were shooting in a real prison, an abandoned prison, but a prison nonetheless. We had done all of the incarceration stuff. I think everyone was very sensitive to Jack going into that scene, him doing it. But for all of us, it was a very difficult thing. We had done our homework. We knew it was supposed to be. But, the thing about his performance, including that last moment, which ironically David had not reported in his article, David Gran, that wonderful journalist who wrote the article in the New Yorker. But we had, in fact, the transcript.
When he yells at Stacy, it wasn't in the David Gran. Yeah.
And I felt that was somehow indicative of Jack's performance, his willingness to do that as well, not to be self-protective as so many actors.
Because that's who the guy is. He's filled with this rage and anger for the person who didn't do everything he believes she can. And he's also somebody who is dealing with the forgiveness of the sins of the past. And I was going to ask you about that because in the David Gran article, it just says the God stuff.
Yeah.
And to me, that is him in a nutshell. And seeing him, the image of seeing him strung up like that, it's barbaric.
And that's how they do it. They stand you and then lay you down. But the thing about Jack is that something you'll be interested in, I think, having to do with shooting digital rather than film, because I've only done one other movie on digital, but in this particular case, I was able to go into that cell with Jack for 20 minutes, 40 minutes, even an hour, and let it run. And he wasn't obliged to present anything. We would one night do some work on his face and say, all right, now we're going to take as long as it takes to do that stuff. Then the next night do more, and the next night do more, and let him discover what that stuff might be as he spent more and more time in solitary.
So because I had a question about the solitary confinement section. Right. Was that... You basically just answered. My question was, how much of that did you find in editing, and did you just roll and watch him actually start to go kind of nuts?
Yeah, we rolled and rolled, which I'd never been able to do because, an actor with if you have a 400-foot mag on, they've got 3 minutes to find something, or even if you have 1,000 feet, and this was different. And I could just be in the little small room with him with a little Mophie, and see what happened. Obviously, we had places we wanted to go, and the question I was asking myself directorially is, all of us try to describe nightmare. And there's a whole lexicon of what nightmares might look like. But what is it to be in a room for 10 hours? What is it to be in there for 10 days? What is it to be in there for 10 weeks or 10 months or 10 years? What does that do, and what does that look like and feel like? And so
it looks like, I think, banging your head against a concrete wall.
Well,
and that the visceral sort of bookend of that is, what is he actually banging his head against?
Oh no! We prepared.
Was there a pad?
We prepared a piece of wall that we then painted, and I stuck a little tube in his hair for the bloodline to drip down. And
I love that effect.
And all of that, but yeah, we knew we were going to get there at the end.
And in the midpoint of the movie, a little sort of ray of sunshine sort of comes in the form of probably Laura Dern, who's in the middle of a sort of renaissance of just making everything she touches shine. And she's been doing it for years and years.
Yeah, it's not a secret to those of us who've been watching her work for so long. But.
And to me, the quintessential Laura Dern scene in this movie is her and the snitch, and sort of it's a seduction scene in a way. And watching her use the truck and use her charm to get what she wants out of this person. And how did that work with someone so experienced and someone so inexperienced?
Well, Jack is a volatile personality, and you know that because you've just made a movie with him.
Sure do.
And I think, but for Laura, I think I might have had a harder time. Laura she not only has two nutty, great, wonderful parents, actors, both. She's been married to others, had affairs with more, and has been around for this since she was maybe, acting at 12 years old. She understood how to be there for him. And she was extraordinarily nurturing to him in the process, as Elizabeth might have been to Todd in the actual movie. So there's some meta there. And to me, what's beautiful about her performance is that as an actress who's capable of going to such sort of eccentric extremes, this is a very, very internal, very quiet performance. And the scene that I love most, and I should just back up. I deliberately kept them apart until they started working together. I did all of his stuff, I did all of her stuff, until they actually met in that cell. They hadn't really spent any time together. I wanted that to have the feel of discovery. I wanted them to, as two actors, have that awkwardness and discomforting thing. So for me, the moment that just tears me apart is when they start talking about God, and she says, well, I don't know, maybe, and I see her, it's that great actor for whom, great actors are, they're oddly self-contained, I think.
But you can see her wrestling with the moment.
That's right. And usually they keep us out to some degree. And then there's that moment when they open the window and they let you in. And that to me is that moment.
Their chemistry continuously, with the exception of a couple of fantastical things you do of him in her kitchen and them in the dream, they're separated through a pane of glass. And their chemistry is off the charts.
That's one of those words, chemistry. Isn't it really just really good writing and
100%, because we have no idea what could actually be happening.
Chemistry. Right. It's like
yes, and I've been on the end of that, where I've been on movies where the two actors love each other and we can't make it work in editing, and I've been on another version where the actors hate each other and people are like, they must have really been in love.
Exactly.
But what's interesting is I want to get back to the casting. Are those people found through local casting in Atlanta?
No. There a number of casting agents who I really love. I've worked with several great casting directors here. When looking for those parts, new faces and people that I don't really know, I tend to go to New York. Yeah. Most of those folks are stage actors as well, David Wilson Barnes, and I just tend to, I don't know, maybe because I don't know them, that I have no preconception of what they're supposed to be. But I'm usually delighted. That's one of the parts of the process that really I look forward to.
One of my favorite sections of the movie is with Dr. Hurst.
Yes.
The fire expert. And I've probably seen that actor a million times without knowing it, but I immediately went to my IMDb. I wanted to know what your relationship is with Jeff Perry.
Well, Jeff Perry, he's one of the great actors of our generation, and oddly unsung because he was a founding member of Steppenwolf. And as everyone in the Steppenwolf company went off and got famous, like John Malkovich and Gary Sinise and Laurie Metcalf and everybody, Jeff was the last one to leave. He stayed there. He's still taught there. He then recently had a great success now in this show called Scandal. And nothing has made any of us happier than to see people, chasing after Jeff, trying to get his autograph. But he's been one of my best friends, actually, because I'm from Chicago and I've known all those guys since we grew up together. And I literally when I thought about the script, I had one person in mind, and I just picked up the phone and I said, would you come? He flew in, got in at midnight, tried on the beard, showed up on the set at 5:30 in the morning. We did the 2 scenes. He was on a plane that night at 9 o'clock to get back to shoot his TV show.
And one of my favorite lines of the movie is when he says, he can use all the good karma he can get. And that's, to me, an example of brilliant writing and directing, because I don't need to know anything else about him. I know that he's these experts, and we've seen shows like The Staircase, the documentary, and these murder shows, and people who are willing to volunteer their time pro bono are, few and far between.
Right. And of course, that's what Todd was not, because what the greatest problem with the criminal justice system among so many is poverty and class.
That's what I love when you connect him and Ponch together.
Which
people don't do that.
You realize that, yes, of course it's race, and that's disproportionate, but the race part is as much about poverty as anything, the inability to hire adequate representation, experts, for instance.
You just watch him get steamrolled in the trial, and how underrepresented he is, and how that watching injustice firsthand happen on somebody who was kind of like this feral beast, like Jack and Willingham, and you're sort of putting together how unfair it is and how helpless it is, and it's almost like he starts to read through this book and there's words he doesn't even understand. He never had a chance.
Right. No, I mean, the jury was out 45 minutes.
I love the reaction. I want to ask you about that. The reaction on Jack when the lawyer's like, we'll be here for, a while. It's going to go for days. And then you have this unbelievable reaction on Jack when it says the jury's reached deliberation or whatever. He has,
and you'll have seen this too, he has great stillness, which is very interesting. And in certain moments, even you can write upon his face,
right?
In a way. And I think that's what happens.
Because that reaction tells me this is a guy who knows what's about to happen.
Yeah, that's right.
And you cut out right at the right time, and I just...
Right.
Were you, and you worked with a cinematographer I really admire, John Gulasarian. Were you guys, because like all your movies, even if they're steeped in reality, and sometimes bleak reality, they always look well. They always look great to me. And you managed to do that where it wasn't this sort of washed out, depressing sort of cinematography. You kind of let the locations tell the story as much as possible, and you still sort of...
There's some subtlety to what we tried to do because, indeed, what that place where Jack and Laura, especially, where they would be speaking, in reality, it would probably just be fluorescent top light, period. And we wanted there to be some variety of sense of either time of day or weather or intimacy as it changed and as that plastic seemed to disappear. I think we used the reflections more in the beginning to suggest distance between them, and then we start to polar them and get them out of there in some way. They're still there, but much subtler. John is one of these guys who is telling the story with me. He's the conversations are as much about what is the arc of the character, what is the meaning of the scene, as much of that as it is about, what should the light look like? Because he wants to first understand my intention emotionally, then we can talk about light.
And same for your editor, I'm guessing.
Well, my editor is a guy named Steve Rosenblum, with whom I went to film school 1,000 years ago. He cut my student film and has cut everything I've ever done. My daughter, at a young age, came to sit in the cutting room with us. I think she was about 13 or something, and she came back and we were having dinner that night, and my wife asked her what was it like being there in the cutting room. She goes, "They're not working, they're just laughing and having fun." And I think that, in fact, I make movies as an excuse to be able to sit in a dark room with him for 4 and 5 months.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, he's fantastic and obviously a friend.
And is he cutting while you're shooting?
Definitely.
And you watch an assemblage.
He doesn't believe, and I don't really believe in such a word, an assemblage. I think that's a
first cut.
Yeah, I mean, look,
an editor's cut.
I think my way of talking is writing or shooting the film, and his way of answering is cutting the film, and then I respond it, and he responds, and we're like two old, like the Sunshine Boys, yelling at each other. What? Are you on crack? Why would you make that cut? That kind of thing. But it gets there faster, and you get to see where you are, and he's utterly willing to change it.
Has there ever been anything you guys have really, in any of your movies, that you've really gone to the mat on that you think?
Always.
Is there anything famously that one of you gave up on?
Oh boy. Oh gosh, there are so many things that aren't in movies that might have been there and ruined them utterly if one of us hadn't sort of relented. Gee, I'm trying to think. There's the whole third act of Legends of the Fall was sort of torn apart. We had a preview of Legends of the Fall, the first preview where we took it to an audience, and we had done something in the first act that people started to giggle about inappropriately. And we thought we had just had this movie nailed. And we looked at each other and literally just said, "We're fucked." And then it went straight downhill from there. And all we did was to go back in fact, after that, and redo this moment in the first act, and it went then through the roof because I hadn't sort of betrayed the audience in some particular way. And I think probably the fault had been mine, that I had insisted on something
Usually is.
that he has held over my head ever since. Yeah.
Did you and John Guleserian reference any other movies that you were watching that were sort of inspiring you before you went and did this?
No. I don't tend not to do that. I like to talk about like painting or still photography.
What was some of the stuff you were talking about for this?
Well, with this, there's been remarkable still photography about incarceration. There are just great books, particularly a couple of books about death row, and so we had those. I don't remember the name of the photographers, but
I love Terrence Simon's book about that she did with the Innocence Project of people going back to.
Yeah. And in fact, some of those books also had extraordinary quotes from I think that one did too, of the guys talking about what their experience had been. And I obviously met and talked to a lot of those guys who had been on and also been off.
There's also one shot I wanted to ask you about. I keep going back to the end of the movie because when the curtains close. And it's sort of it feels almost like
theatrical.
But in an amazing way. We see Stacy, and then it's sort of like, and that's all. Like, that's what it is. Like, show's over. Like,
yeah. I mean, an interesting thing that for me was how the whole edition of some of the magical realism that you evoke came about. Because Jeffrey first had the idea of a way of dramatizing her letters getting to him.
I love him
going
in
to his house,
kitchen, yeah.
And then we began to build on that. But having done that, having introduced that voice of magical realism, the introduction of his daughter was something that we really struggled over. And then, because I'd read a lot of Todd's letters, Elizabeth Gilbert, who's the woman, the real woman, participated with us and gave us all of Todd's letters and her letters and talked a lot about him, about their relationship. In his letters, he talked a lot about his kids, and he wrote about them in the present tense. And he would celebrate their birthdays in his letters, and he would do drawings for them. It's art. And when we decided to do that, you don't know if it's going to get really hokey. And I will say, to Jack's credit, he was very anxious about it and wondering if we're going to do something that's going to be really a violation of the reality of the character. And when that girl appeared in the cell, I saw something just come over him. But I also realized that I had written a line or so for her, and immediately I knew that would be Naf. And we cut her speaking. That somehow in dreams, people we see, I'm not sure we actually hear them.
Right.
Or maybe there's just a word or something, but I felt it was her silence, ironically, that made it. But what I also did deliberately was to do all those sequences in camera. It's not visual effects. In other words, you see the whole prison cell, and he moves over to the wall, and as he moves into the wall, she slips in and goes and sits on the bed, and as the camera pans back, she's there. Similarly, when he's in his cell later, I felt that to do those in camera, almost theatrically, was not to make them magic but strange in some way.
Yeah, nothing about them feels hokey. They feel, and the final moment of her touching his hand after he's gone kills me. Yeah,
that was, again, one of those things that just occurred to you as you're, because we shot that later. Because I felt that relationship had worked, that would be the
And are those scenes improvised between Jack and the girl? That was written?
They were written.
Was there any improvisation in the film? With Laura or anything?
Yeah, Laura and Jack did a lot of improvisation that we didn't use.
When he tells her to stand and turn around, was that improvised? Because her reaction feels so real and weird.
That's a great moment, because he was seductive with women, and he does try to do that, and that's a trope, the jailhouse romance, when he's going to someone seduce her. And when he did it the first time, I thought that Laura was a little bit too accepting of it. And all I said to her was, I said, you should got to call him on his shit. So it's her. He says, give me a twirl. And she goes, no.
It's an amazing reaction.
Yeah, and that's her.
Wow.
But I had asked her to do something other because I think she was a little susceptible.
Right. He is very charming.
He is, yeah.
I'm so thrilled that we got to do this.
Yeah.
And I'm so thrilled this movie exists because not only is it an important document, it also, as all of your movies that are always about stuff, it works as a story, which sometimes people only can do one. And I think it's exceptional. And to live with this movie for as many years as you have and to take that home with you after set, and I think it really paid off.
Well, I was thinking of one thing, which is, it was a long time. It was 9 years ago that 10 years ago we optioned the script, and we couldn't get the financing, and we finally managed to, and had to suddenly jump it. But I kept thinking about that quote that Obama kept using, which was the Dr. King quote about the arc of the moral universe bending toward justice. The real quote is, the arc of the moral universe is long, and it bends toward justice. So, this isn't done yet either, this whole issue.
Thank you for making it. And
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. If you'd like to hear more, you can find past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Also, if you're enjoying our show, please take a moment to rate and review us. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow cinephiles find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.